Hello, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, Madeira, why its tax and lifestyle benefits are so appealing to the British market. Now, today is Thursday, the 24th of February, 2022. It's an interesting day here in London and around the world for obvious reasons. But meanwhile, we're going to keep talking to you about Portugal and Madeira. And let me tell you who I am, first of all. Some of you will recognize me already, clearly. But my name's Christina Hippisley, and I'm the General Manager of the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce here in the UK. And we run a program of live and virtual events like this all year round here in the UK, which we call Moving to Portugal. And I, as you can see, moderate the Moving to Portugal webinars, one of which we're doing today. And I also run the live events, which luckily after 2 years of a long COVID hiatus, we are back to normal now. And the next Moving to Portugal show and seminars live face-to-face will be here in central London on the 31st of March. So just in a few weeks' time, 2022. If you want to know more about it, here's the website address, movingtoportugal.org.uk. Register to come along. We'd love to see you. I can see that our participants are all flooding in now to listen to the webinar. So obviously, all of you are keen on Madeira, and we want to help you make your lives in Madeira. Now, I'll also tell you very briefly what we're going to be discussing in the webinar today. Are you thinking of relocating to Madeira in order to retire there? Maybe. Perhaps you want to buy a second home there and spend a big chunk of the year there in the warm Atlantic climate, which would be a very nice change. Now, as you probably know, the reason why so many of you have joined the webinar today is that Madeira does offer unrivaled benefits to new residents and foreign investors, those who might just want to spend several months a year in Portugal or in Madeira particularly, or set up a business there in Madeira. Now, today I've invited two of our corporate members of the Chamber of Commerce here in the UK to talk to us in more detail about the specific benefits of Madeira. And we're going to do an informal, very short presentation from each of them, and then lots of questions and answers from the audience, many of which have been sent in already. So some of the topics we'll be covering will be Madeira's lifestyle, its health care system, how you can manage your move, the tax breaks in Madeira, the flexible residency options, and the Golden Visa program. And the other thing we'll be talking about is the property market in Madeira and what the prices are doing and what the future holds. Okay, so any questions, just put them in the chat box or the Q&A box as we go. And we will be asking them directly of our two speakers. Now, I'm just going to tell you very briefly, we expect the webinar not to last more than 45 minutes, clearly, because the main thing is for you to get some of your questions answered and then talk directly to John or Tânia after the webinar, or you can set up an email exchange with them whenever you want. So after my very brief introduction, I'm now going to introduce and talk to John Mather, who will talk to us for a few minutes with a few slides. Then I'm going to talk to Tânia Castro, and then we'll do the Q&As. So firstly, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Hello, John. Good morning and welcome to the webinar. Hello, John. And I'm just going to introduce John very briefly, a bit about his background before he shows us a few slides, which will explain some of the things he's an expert on in Madeira. And John, I have to say, is a happy client of the Chamber's Moving to Portugal program, because when John was advising a former client on his client's move to Portugal, John became so enthusiastic about Portugal itself and more importantly Madeira, that he actually moved himself to Portugal in 2016. And in 2020, John became permanently resident in Madeira. On the back of that, before he moved to Madeira, John did have a 50-year career in the property investment and wealth management business, and lots of assets under management, lots of experience in property. But more importantly, he has a wide-ranging view and experience in how you move your money, how you need to think about your future lifestyle. And John now runs a company called Émigré Limited in Madeira. Émigré is a complete relocation service for foreign citizens who want to move to Portugal, but he has particular expertise in Madeira, clearly, because he now lives and works in Madeira. And Émigré, his business, advises all nationalities on residence by investment. We'll talk a bit more about that. But that's basically researching, apart from deciding to move to Madeira, a big part of that might be where you're going to live. And John's company helps those people researching, finding and negotiating a property purchase. And they work a lot with local specialists on the visas and the taxation aspects. I should also add, before we hand the floor to John for a few minutes, John and his company, Émigré, will be with us in London at the Moving to Portugal show on the 31st of March. So fear not, if you can't get hold of John or you prefer to talk to him in person, he will be with us in London on the 31st of March. Now, John, I think, should we move now to your slides, and then I'll introduce Tânia in more detail shortly. So I think if we could move to the next slide. I think John will now tell us a little bit about why he thinks Madeira is such a good place to live, and advise some of our viewers and listeners. John, over to you briefly.
Thank you for that. I think what I'd like to do is to make sure that we concentrate on a couple of issues, because I could go on forever telling you about the advantages of Madeira, the health service, the climate, the 300 plus days of sunshine. I mean, we're struggling at 21 today. So
it's 1 degree in central London, and it's 21 degrees in Madeira, gentlemen and ladies, just to give you a flavour of what we're dealing with. Yes.
So we're struggling nicely here at the moment. So let's take it from there. Can we do the next slide? I think what we'll do is we'll probably cover most of the meaningful stuff in the questions and answer session. But if I just give you some of the facts, we did a poll recently and looked at priorities of why people might want to move. And do you know something from that? I learned that averages are of no use whatsoever. Yeah. You know, your temperature could be on average, but your head's in the fridge and your feet are in the fire. That's not necessarily healthy average, is it? So everybody is bespoke, everybody is an individual, and our service is particularly related to property and the negotiation and hand-holding you through the event. One of the most important things that we do first is to introduce you to a competent lawyer and tax specialist, a local one, because going off and imagine that the transactions are like in England is a huge mistake that people often make, and that's where they get into trouble. So that's why they need people like Tânia's service, which is one of the leading management companies on the island. We start there and build your team for you, because this is very much a team effort. Our job then is to handhold you through the exercise and try and explain when things are not working, how to get them fixed, where to go for various items, and principally to understand and research properties that you might buy, or funds that you might buy. So I'm not going to go through all these lovely benefits of being here. My only regret with Madeira is I didn't come earlier. So next slide, please. Really what we're trying to do is to make sure this move, which could be probably the most significant move you're going to make in the next 30 years, because you're changing your lifestyle, and we've got to start with the Maslow type approach to things, and we're starting with the first 2 levels. If we go to the next slide, we're looking after making sure that it can't be wrong. That's our purpose. This move is right first time. That's what we've got to do. And if you can then build on those solid foundations, then in fact you will actually get to the other levels of enjoyment. Let me touch on, next slide. We've got to design a plan. But one of the elements of the plan is the one of the unknowns. And this, from my financial services background, is an area that I've got lots of experience in. People totally underestimate how long they're going to live, and surprisingly by as much as 10 years. If you look at this example that I've given you, taking a single male, single female and a couple, all age 65, they've got a 50% chance of getting to 85, 88 and 92. Sorry, go back one.
Go back.
Right.
Oh. Sorry, I'm having a slight slide malfunction here.
All right.
Then we go back again. Hang on. Oops. There we go. Sorry about that, ladies and
And
gentlemen.
a 25% chance of getting to 92, 94 and 97. So many of the people I'm dealing with are looking at a 30-year project here. So we've got to think long, we've got to think about how this situation works for you, both in terms of immediate benefits, the inflationary impact on your income, how that might be satisfied and dealt with. So it's more than just buying a house, more than just making a move. There's a lot of things to think about. But there are lots of benefits too. I thought we'd have a look at the average, go back, sorry, the slide.
Next slide.
Yeah. Looking at the expenditure, this is one of the first benefits. The cost of living here is seriously less than in the UK. And these figures are from 2019. Last year was a bit of an anomaly. And I believe that you're seeing inflation, underlying inflation, around about the 7% mark in the UK now. And prices are hurting in the UK. We've not had as much inflation here, although we do feel the impact. But in 19, look at the differences just on expenditure. Serious savings in fundamental things. If you compare specifically London to Funchal, the benefit is even greater.
We should add Funchal is the capital of Madeira. I'm sure most of you know that, but
yes, it's not called Ronaldo yet, but
it's not called Ronaldo, but it might be shortly. Yeah.
But there are serious advantages there. Now, where this is important, let's go on to the next thing. In financial planning terms, what matters to people is actually the discretionary spend. Not how much they own in total, but how much is left after you've paid your tax, after you've paid those fixed costs that you've got, after you've made some long-term savings. In England, you tend to finish up with about 20% of your gross pay available for discretionary spending. Just moving and taking advantage of the lower cost of living, that discretionary spend would double. That's not a bad start.
In Madeira.
In Madeira. Now, if in fact, in the next slide, we can improve on that further, because if you qualify for some of the high value trades, which Tânia will be covering under the non-habitual residence, there are tax benefits. And those tax benefits can increase that 40% of gross up to 55%. That financial freedom is enormously beneficial. Frees up lots of degrees of freedom, what you do with your time, how you travel, where you travel, and whether you turn left at the top of the flight steps or right. So
those were the old days, John.
No, I'm sorry, but from an inheritance tax point of view, if you don't go first class, your kids definitely will. So the next slide, please. From our service, the thing that I spotted was that there's a problem. As part of our wealth management business, we had 6 real estate offices in central London and in the southeast of England. And I was very fortunate that Prudential bought them off me, because 78 staff and 6 offices was not a lot of fun running, to be honest. But people come here and they talk to a real estate agent and they take advice from them. Now, I'm not saying that that's bad, but just think about that for a moment. Their job is to get the best price on behalf of their client, the vendor, right? There is an important service to be had for somebody acting on your part, the buyer. Checking the contract, making sure it all works, and Tânia, I'm sure, will cover that. I won't enter into her space on this. But certainly going around doing the background research, defining what you want, narrowing it down so that, typically, the case we just completed, we looked at over 40 properties for the client's definition. When they came for 10 days, we had it down to 10 primary properties which we thought fitted the bill and were reasonably priced. We managed successfully to buy that property on number 8. It saved an enormous amount of time and benefiting. It is not difficult to justify our modest 1% fee. Nobody can get the property purchase plan right within 1%. And if we don't get you 5 times what we cost you, then frankly I'm disappointed in our service, and I'm not disappointed yet with anybody. So let's have a look at the next slide for one other factor which I think is quite amazing. Property prices, say in Funchal at the moment, are an average of about 2,300 euros a square metre. That's a reasonable price for a quality property with what most people are asking for. So I decided what I would do is I would colour the postcode map in England, showing where, if you sell your property and you buy an identically sized one here, those people who've got a red postcode will still have cash in the bank at the end of the exercise. For instance, in central London where I lived, 7 years ago I sold in Marylebone, and that was 17,600 euros a square metre. Now imagine I move out here and pay 3. Imagine the amount of capital that frees up, and you don't have to get involved in complicated, expensive equity release. So I'll just make a few of those points. We can cover most of the other matters in the questions and answers. And hopefully I've kept to my time limit.
Yes, thank you, John. Brevity is all. So these are John's contact details, but clearly we'll be giving them to you again later in the webinar. And I should add that we're recording this webinar and it'll be available straight after the event on our movingtoportugal.org.uk webinar library. So never fear, this information will stay around indelibly on the web for the foreseeable future. But do come and see us on the 31st of March if you can. We'd love to see you. Now, John, thank you very much for that summary of what Émigré does in Madeira. Now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, our good friend and chamber member, Tânia Castro. Tânia, welcome. Thank you for giving up your precious time today. And,
thank you. Good morning.
Yes. Tânia is the general manager of TPMc in Madeira, which is founded in 1995. And you've now got, Tânia, for your sins, due to your success, you've got 55 staff, which I know from experience is a lot of responsibility. Your 55 staff specialize in accounting, legal, and the tax aspects of helping individuals and companies set up in Madeira. And I know from the ethos that your business has is customer satisfaction is very much top of your list. But just to give you a little bit of background about you, Tânia, 17 years in the business. We're going to give some more information. Here we go. Tânia's been in TPMc for 17 years. Lots of experience of accounting, fiscal issues and legal background. And she also writes for lots of Portuguese newspapers about Madeira, the benefits of Madeira. And clearly, Tânia is also from Madeira, lots of family and friends in Madeira. So there's nothing Tânia doesn't know about Madeira. And I can vouch for that because she's helped me on numerous occasions on my business trips and my holidays in Madeira as part of the Chamber of Commerce. And Tânia, tell us a little bit. Clearly, you meet just as many customers as John is now, because the number of people going to Madeira to scope it out and talk about moving there is growing every day. I know we're going to move to the next slides. You're going to give us a very few slides about some of the real benefits of Madeira, why people are actually moving there and considering it so hard at the moment. Not just British, but the Germans, the Scandinavians, the French, all nationalities actually. And Tânia, tell us a little bit about why Madeira is so appealing within the Portuguese context. Your first slide has now come up.
Yeah, so first of all, and Carolina, can you just, thank you. Just for you to give you some context about the situation at this time. I fully agree with John. So Madeira, and for the past years, traditionally has been a market that people would come to at least pass part of the retirement, because we do have a lot of qualities related to the cost of living, to the climate, to the peace, to the safety. And I think that the COVID has rushed a little bit people that were thinking about changing the residency or going to a safest place or a quieter place or a place where they could, even with the pandemic, they could breathe outside. So the last year, from my experience, has been a very uncharacteristic year. And why? We had COVID, we still have COVID, but people want to move. now, and they have been for the past months. And if I talk specifically from the British market, we have been having a lot of people from the UK questioning and coming to Madeira as an option to in fact live. But as John said, and just for you to understand, what we do is we complement John's services. While John is very focused on the best possible business for the client, because that's his goal, we need to follow up with the rest of it. So how he's going to stay in a fiscal side? Is he coming to Madeira to reside, in fact, or just as a non-resident? Is still going to be in UK for some years and then transfer completely the residency to Madeira? What about capital gains, annual taxes, the bureaucracy that he needs to have to acquire a real estate? So that's where we start working. And at the end, we team up with John, and that's what the work has as a complementary side. So just for you to understand, the past months, we have been watching and helping UK residents to come to Madeira for several situations. We have the ones that are now ending the active life and come to Madeira to retire, then one, in fact, to live in Madeira. We have young entrepreneurs from UK coming to Madeira to work, because we also have a very good communication system, an MIT department, a very good college, protocol with Carnegie Mellon in the United States, so a very good high-tech sector. And a lot of young people who are already entrepreneurs in UK are coming to Madeira to work, also due to the network we have with the digital nomads established.
And the cryptocurrencies are also a big area.
Yeah, exactly. Established already in Madeira. So at the end, what the client needs is to define his position. And John is absolutely right when he states that each case it's a case. So we need to know exactly what are the intentions of the person who's coming or the family who's coming. If he in fact will live, if he will not live, if he will continue to work, if he's not working. So we can help him in the best way possible, because sometimes some of the procedures, and I do understand that sometimes things don't go as well as expected, because also probably the services provider didn't have the full information. So our job is to make sure that things go as smoothly as possible. But that is Portugal, so we are Europe. We have bureaucracy, so we understand that there are several administrative and legal processes that need to be complied, also fiscal, but we are here to help, okay?
Okay.
So this is the context I wanted to give you. I did some slides with basic highlights, because I do understand that the fiscal side is a bit boring, and I have to apply this word because I'm sure that everybody agrees with it, but it's something that is needed, and you need to know at least the basics, and that there are options. And then in a future, if you want to discuss more deeply, then you have all our contacts, so you can contact us directly and we can analyze casuistically your specific situation. So to come to Madeira, to acquire real estate, first of all, you need to have a Portuguese fiscal number. For any acquisition of real estate or capital share, this is needed. As you are no longer EU, you will need a fiscal representative. We also do that side of the fiscal number acquisition inscription. So the fiscal representative is somebody who's already residing in Portugal, in Madeira, and has a fixed address where the public entities can send any information regarding the acquisition, the annual taxes, any change on the record of that specific individual. So you do the Portuguese fiscal number. We act as fiscal representative, or anybody you know already and you trust in Madeira, that is a resident can also act. And then we see the best solutions. Okay, the first thing is we will ask your Portuguese fiscal number as a non-resident, because at the time that you ask it, you are in fact a non-resident. Okay, you will need it to sign the promissory agreement that will stipulate the conditions of the public deed of acquisition that you will be doing if you decide to acquire the real estate, for example. Okay, Carolina, then we can go to the, okay. So let me just tell you that the most common visas for residency that we are now establishing, especially for UK market, is the Golden Visa and the D7, okay? Both of them are quite popular for the UK market. The Golden Visa is the only one within the visas that Portugal has established that will allow you to have a residency card without having the need to in fact reside fiscally in Madeira. Okay, this is quite important if you think about your future options and you're still in a very active part of your life and you do not want to live in fact in Madeira for the time being. Probably you will need it later, but not for the time being. Okay, so the Golden Visa is the only one that will secure you a residency visa without the need. You will only need to spend 14 days in the first year and 7 days on the following years. It will also allow you, as all the other visas, family reunification. So only the head of the family needs to do the investment, and then once he passes to the part of the biometrics, we can ask the reunification. I know this is a bit technical, but I'll be glad to specify for clients or people that are interested in and give full information later, okay? In January this year, we had a change in the Golden Visa program specifically. What changed? So basically, some of the options to acquire the visa, like the capital transfer, the fund subscription, have increased. But the most interesting change was that is no longer allowed to buy residential real estate in the main metropolis of the mainland. So Lisbon or Porto, Algarve, the coast. The state has transferred that acquisition to the islands and to the interior of the country. And why? To promote the investment, the foreigner investment, but also to protect the real estate market. As John said, if we cannot compare the prices of Madeira with the prices of London, so the prices of London have increased so much that it's difficult to acquire real estate, quality real estate in London, unless you have a lot of potential, financial potential. In Madeira, you're still covered. So even though the real estate market has grown 8% in last year, even with COVID, we still have very attractive prices. And John can also attest that we still have very good opportunities related to real estate. So if your dream house is a house in the country, and please, the country in Madeira is 15 minutes from Funchal, from the main city. So you have also to have that in mind. It's possible to have it at a very, very, very convenient price. This is one of the highlights. Due to this change, we have been receiving a lot of questions and a lot of interest also from the UK market related to real estate in Madeira. Because the prices are very good, the opportunities are there. We have weekly flights to London, so it's quite easy. Sometimes it's easier to go to
daily flight.
Yeah.
Sorry, daily flights, yeah.
Yeah, it's easier to go to London at this time than to Lisbon. I mean, I have friends that have to go to Lisbon and they go through London because it's cheaper. Imagine that. So it's the market is really, really strange about that. So besides all of that, there are fiscal advantages that can be of interest for you. So, Carolina, can you pass the slide, please? The D7 is, and just for you to give you some highlights between one and the other, so you can know that there are several options, but it really depends on your profile as investor and your profile as resident, okay? The D7 is in fact a residency visa. So you can apply for it, but only if you in fact decide to live in Madeira and change your fiscal residency to Madeira and deliver your annual taxes in Madeira. So, and of course, close your UK record as a resident. It's specially adapted for pensioners, retired, but also for people who have a stable and monthly income. And the Portuguese authorities have established very low amounts per person for the family, annually speaking. I mean, for the first adult, you need to show that you have at least 7,200 euros as an annual income. I mean, this is really low. 3,600 for the second or more adults, depending on your family aggregate, and 2,160 per children. Okay, this is the basics for the D7, and it's also an option for people who cannot make the minimum for the golden visa but still want to buy a house and come and live to Madeira. Okay, the other slide please, Carolina. So besides the advantages of residing in Madeira, the real estate market, and all of that, when you become a resident, and this is only applicable to residents, to fiscally residents in Madeira, you can apply for the non-habitual resident. It's a regime similar to the non-dom that you have already established in UK, but with several nuances that make it more attractable. For example, if you're already retired and receive a pension, you will only have a 10% tax on pensions obtained abroad. If you're still working as an entrepreneur, and you want to move to Madeira and continue to work and develop your business, you will have a fixed rate of 20%. So instead of having a plafond that can go until 40 or 43, like in UK, you will have a fixed rate of 20% on all the income you develop and generate from Portugal to the world. And then you have several possibilities of exemptions depending on the kind of revenue you have obtained abroad. This is quite interesting. If you think that, if you think that, for example, no, I want to come to Madeira, but I want to continue to develop a business. So that's also possible. You can add the benefits from the visa with the benefits of the non-habitual, and we can optimize your taxation. This is what John was talking about when he said that you could stay up to 40 or more % on your income free after you pay your obligations. So this can give a boost to your life, even changing to a different country. I can also tell you, and Christina and John can testify, that almost everybody in Madeira speaks and writes English. I mean, this is basic. It's like a second language. We do, and also because we have a lot of tourism, so we also speak other languages. So it's very easy to adapt. It's not a question of language, of climate. You will see and you will find that it's a very good adaptation. There is also a point that I would like to highlight is there's no wealth tax, so or capital gain tax, and there's no heritage from direct individuals, descendant or ascendant, is tax exempt. You will have a stamp duty, but it's very low when compared with the taxes you have in United Kingdom, for example. We both John and myself are available to study your file. So if you think that you can fit in and Madeira is an option, the goal of this webinar is to also tell you we have good services provided in Madeira. So you can ask, we can study your case. There's no need to be afraid to ask. And I mean, even John has moved to Madeira, so I think that's
well, John is living proof.
Yeah.
And can I just say, Tânia, thank you for those few slides. Here are your contact details. Just before we move to questions from the audience, I have to say that view of the main street in Funchal on the right-hand side of I love that view. Look at those flowers. Oh, look at the jacaranda. Oh, that is what you're looking at right now, isn't it?
Yes, this is the street where we have the office. So we are very lucky to have it there. But you will find that in Funchal, all the streets are very, very characteristics, flowers and trees.
But you're the island of roses, because it's such a temperate climate. Everything grows. So
and in May, we have the flower festival. So one of the highlights of the year that attracts a lot of tourism. So we are a flower island.
I'm on my way. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for that. Now we're going to move to questions from the audience. I have to say we had over 129 registrations for this webinar, which just shows you how popular Madeira is. So I know lots of you are listening and watching now. Lovely to see you. Thank you for taking the time today to log in and see us all. We've got lots of questions from you in advance, clearly, which we're going to work through now. But we've just had a question live in from one of our viewers, which I'm going to ask one of our two panelists now before we move to the questions we've had already from you guys. And I'm going to ask the question and then John or Tânia can answer it. The question is from Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Once you have successfully applied for residency in Portugal, what are the requirements to learn the Portuguese language and by when? Tânia, perhaps you'd like to answer that one.
Well, there are no requirements to learn Portuguese. So you are only required to learn Portuguese if on your 6th year of permanency, you want to apply for the Portuguese passport and nationality, okay? On the 5th year of permanency, you will get your permanent certificate of residency, but you do not need to apply for a passport, okay? If you do not apply, you don't need to learn Portuguese, okay?
Okay, so you only need to pass the Portuguese language test if you're applying for a Portuguese passport. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, well, there you go. Hopefully, Andrew, that's reassured you. Right. Now we're going to move to the questions. Lots of great questions from our audience already with me, but please feel free to put any more questions in the box, the chat box or the Q&A box. We will probably spend the next 10 minutes or so answering questions from you guys. So I'm going to start now. John Mather, we have a question from one of our viewers, which they sent in advance. And I'm sure you're watching now, Mr. Viewer, or Mrs. Viewer. Thank you for sending it in. The question is, John, one of our viewers has asked you, is it worth keeping a home in the UK if you want to move to Madeira?
Back to individual circumstances. If you have unlimited amount of capital, then fine, I can see an argument. If it's available for you for residing, then that's one extra tag that you've got on your limitation of days on your UK tax residence situation. If it's been your primary residence, and it's when you first sell, it would be outside the capital gains tax net, but after a 9-month period now, you could find yourself paying capital gains tax on your primary residence if you decide to sell, say, 2 or 3 years from now. There were about 30 consulting documents in last year's budget, and although the budget in England looked very benign, the consulting documents are a euphemism for draft legislation that we told you about and it's your fault you didn't respond. I mean, And there's some very nasty little bits in capital gains tax there. For instance, one of the implications is that you might find that rebasing on death actually becomes a problem. And your inheritor may well in future inherit your base cost as opposed to the uplifted cost on the death. That's a massive capital gains tax hype. And this government in England needs money, and you're a soft target. If you're gaining income from property in the UK, you will pay tax on your UK income from that property, and you have to rely on the treaty to deal with tax here. Also, you're running currency risk because you're in pounds in the UK, and if that's a major part of your income that's coming from that source, then you really need to think about that carefully, because you could be on a declining situation. The pound was 134 at the referendum, whereas it's hovering around 119, 120. So that's the sort of that frog in the boiling water problem. So be very careful. You take some advice on that about your individual circumstances. There's no right answer.
I ask, we've got another good question from one of our viewers right now, and it's very linked to what you've just said, John. And our viewer asks, are dividends taxed on UK listed shares? If they're living in Madeira.
If you're resident in Madeira and you've got the non-habitual residence, a foreign dividend in the UK, let's say an income, a dividend coming from a UK company, let's say, simplify it. From the UK perspective, that's called disregarded income. It's the same as pensions are also disregarded income. When those dividends for an NHR person are received in Madeira, they're exempt for 10 years. And the pension isn't exempt, it suffers a 10% tax charge. Before the Brexit thing happened, that was also zero, but now the pension's moved to 10%. So so a dividend policy is actually part of your profile. You've got to be very careful about buying structured products and commission related products and investment funds, because they frankly don't work here. And again, you've got currency risks to consider.
Okay.
Sorry, Christina, can I just take the opportunity to compliment John? So he's accurate on the taxation, but please understand that each financial instrument is a specific instrument. So we cannot generalize. And sometimes people they want to ask general questions, because the exemption on Portugal for the non-habitual depends on the kind of financial instrument and how it would be taxed in the UK, okay? So I fully agree with John, but there are no general questions. In beginning, the UK dividends, if they have the possibility to be taxed in UK, but they will not be taxed also in Portugal if you have the non-habitual, okay?
Okay, great. That clarifies it. So, Tânia, just to ask you a question which we've received from our audience. We covered it in the slide, but we will say it again just to be clear. How much passive income do you need for a D7 visa? You had it on the slide, didn't you?
Yes, I had on the slide. It's 7,200 for the first, and then you have to add the 3 for the second adult or third and the children, okay? It's here. 7,200, 3,600 for the second or more adults, and 2,160 per children. The only confirmation they request, the foreign offices, is the 6 months of bank statements to be presented. Okay.
And again, I think we've clarified this, but again, we had a question from one of our viewers, so I'd like to put it to you, Tânia. Is the NHR scheme, so Portugal's non-habitual residence tax scheme, still available to UK residents post-Brexit?
Yes, the non-habitual is available to everybody who becomes a fiscal resident in Madeira. If it's done through a visa, or with an EU movers from other countries who come to Madeira to reside, it's applicable to both, okay? First of all, you can only apply for the non-habitual once you become a resident, Okay, so the first thing we have to do is to make you a resident.
Okay, fair enough. Carolina, Carolina is our back office guru who's making the whole thing run smoothly. Yes, thank you, Carolina. So we've got the contact details here. Right, we're now going to move on a little bit away from tax back to some lifestyle and property questions. And just before we do that, Tânia, again, we've got a question from the audience. What is the inheritance tax rate in Madeira?
There's no heritage tax in Portugal, and Madeira is Portugal, so it applies. Madeira application for the law is the entire 100% Portuguese law, okay? We have some nuances because we are one of the islands of Portugal, and as an island, we are an ultra-peripheral region, so we have entitled to a reduction of 30% on several taxes applied in Portugal. For example, the corporate tax in Portugal is 21%. Our corporate tax general regime is 14.7%. The personal tax has also reductions. The VAT has only 1% reduction because the government in Madeira didn't establish to apply the 30% reduction. But the law is the Portuguese one. So it means that we do not have heritage tax in Portugal. We have a stamp duty tax. If we're talking about direct ascendant and descendant, okay? We have a stamp duty of 10%, but that's the only thing we have, okay?
If a mother leaves her son the house.
Or a grandmother.
Or grandmother, okay. Right, okay.
Can I just add something there?
Yes,
from the UK perspective, remember that you're still deemed tax resident for inheritance tax purposes until you've been out of the country for at least 4 years and you've adopted your domicile of choice. Now, domicile is a completely different concept to residence, and again that needs very careful planning, because what you don't want to do is to finish up with the worst of both worlds, where you've got assets in the UK attracting inheritance tax when they could have been reorganised and been in Madeira and be exempt.
Okay.
I could put up a very good example of why you should export your granny, for instance. So
bring it to live with you in Madeira.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, John, just before we ask you some practical questions, and Tânia as well, about properties and lifestyle, we've got a lovely question here from John about dogs, which we'll come to in a minute. Do you want to tell us, John, a little bit about medical treatment and healthcare in Madeira? It's a question we get asked a lot. Madeira has this reputation as being a paradise for older people, but I have to say Madeira is all ages and nationalities right now. But it's very clear that the investment in Madeira, in the island, in healthcare is significant, isn't it, John? There's a new hospital opening. Tell us a little bit about how foreign residents organise their medical needs in Madeira right now.
Well, first of all, sadly, I did have a lot of experience of the UK medical system just before I came, before I remarried. My wife died, and I did actually experience horrendous waste of queuing with the National Health Service, and had to rely on private medical health care to get anything like service in the UK. So never ever tell me that the UK National Health Service is actually the Rolls Royce of all medical service. It isn't. The benefit here is first of all that you don't have queues. They are increasing the medical facility. It's at least 250 million euros. I mean, like all government budget, and no doubt that will finish up at 400 million by the time they've finished it. But it's a very serious facility for a population of 250,000 people. And that's to complement several other private hospitals and public hospitals here in Madeira. The service we've had here has been phenomenal. You go along to see a doctor, you don't have to wait very long, you can see him same day. You don't have queues. And you will need to have, if you're doing the golden visa route, you'll have to have medical insurance. I tell you, the medical insurance we bought here, and I'm 74, my wife is 10 years younger, is 200 a month.
And what does that give you?
It's not big money. Well, I could give you a whole list of things, but certainly adequate for virtually everything that one would need.
Yeah.
And I'm very comfortable with the medical insurance they've got here. The service is superb.
Okay. Can I ask you?
Christina, sorry,
Yeah.
just to compliment John, and is absolutely right. 200 euros per month is really a very nice and very well covered insurance. The basic for golden visa, for example, for health, is around 45 euros per month. So I imagine that.
Yeah. Okay. So you can have the Rolls-Royce version, which John's on, or you can have a more reasonable version, particularly if you're not there most of the year under as a golden visa holder. Okay. John. Just before we ask you a couple of property questions, can you just tell us about question from our audience? The tax on any household goods being moved to Madeira. So let's say you are moving from the UK to Madeira. You're selling your house. You're relocating. Tell us, John, how the household goods works and vaccination or health requirements on arrival.
Right. Well, it used to be quite simple. Our first batch of furniture that came across, we had very little problems because we were still part of the EU. The second batch is a problem because we've only got this 1 year window. You have to basically go to the local consulate and get some documentation that gives you the VAT position stated, and then you can have VAT exempt imports. That is a very tight window of 1 year. It sounds a long time, but it disappears very, very quickly. And we can provide the necessary contacts to get that done. There are one or two services that can deal with all of the paperwork for you, right?
Okay. Worth their weight in gold.
If you're going to import a car as well, although in theory you can put it all on the one document, in practice we've found that you actually need two documents from the consulate. And car importing here is very expensive on tax if you get that wrong. Very expensive indeed. My car, which wasn't worth the money, they were asking 34,000 euros to import it. Plainly nonsense, so we sold the car. But you've got to get, again, it's back to professional teams. You get the best provider of the best service you can afford. This is not a rehearsal, this is the real thing, and you've got to get it right first time.
Okay, we're going to take 5 more minutes of questions, just so everybody knows. But thank you, John. Tânia, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, what can I tell you? I can tell you that, for example, and talking about cars, I know that a lot of people want to bring their cars with you when you come to live, but unless it's a very personal or has a big emotional value, you need to be practical, and that's where companies like John's and myself enter. Portugal has one of the highest rates for taxes related to cars. So it's not practical and it's not an optimization of your money if you want to enter with your car into Portugal. Let's sell it and buy a new one in Portugal. So this is also points that we can help you to understand before you spend money, because even if you have and financially you're in a good place, I mean, you don't need to spend more money than the one you should. Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask, John, you might know this, although I think Charlie is recently demised, isn't he? We've got one of our viewers, John. Hello, John. How easy is it to bring a family dog to Madeira? I confess I don't know about that. Tânia, do you or John know about how, if you're a Brit and you want to bring your dog to live with you in Portugal, Madeira, presumably...
Again, you get specialist importers. The documentation has changed since Brexit dramatically. It used to be easy. You used to be able to put my little King Charles Spaniel into a box. He came freight because he was 8 kilos. He was too heavy to bring any other way. But now it's a matter of chipping. Again, specialists. The law keeps on changing. Some of this law isn't even fixed yet, with the goodness knows whatever Brexit will ever mean, if it ever happens. Yeah. So again, back to specialists who know what they're doing.
Tânia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, for the dogs, you need to comply with several vaccination requirements and to have a certification from a certified vet also to attest the health and everything. Because for the domestic animals in Madeira, you have requirements. You need to insert a chip, you need to register. So you need to know that before coming with your animal, okay?
Okay.
Christina, I saw a question, it's from Anne-Marie, who said, if one has a non-habitual resident and permanent residence in the mainland, if it's valid also in Madeira. It is. Madeira is Portugal, so if you have already a non-habitual regime and a permanent residence, it's Portuguese, okay?
Okay, great. Yes, thank you. I just saw that question. Brilliant. All right. John, I've got a big question for you now. Are there... obviously, John, you do a lot of looking at properties in Madeira on behalf of your clients. Does it make sense, one of our readers or listeners is asking, does it make sense to buy a property off plan in Madeira? And what sort of opportunities are there at the moment?
I was dealing with an off-plan situation yesterday from a developer who is very well respected. And I think that's the first thing. You've got to have somebody who's solvent. You want them to finish the job. So we need to just check that thing first. Do you know, I was given prices that are only valid for this week. He wants to revise things on a regular basis, and they're going up. If in fact we can get the application in, because you're supposed to have expended the monies before you can apply for your golden visa, for instance. Well, if it's going to take you 2 years to get the thing built, where in that process do you make sure that you can actually apply for the visa now, proving you'll do the expenditure? So that's where, again, you'd need the specialist advice. So if we're going to set up escrow accounts, the control of those escrow accounts back to the accountant and the law people to get that sewn up tight. What happens if the thing goes bust? If in fact we can get a successful one in place with a well-known, well-respected provider, then in fact, if the benefit I see in it, if I can fix the price today, pay for it over the next 2 years, and get an advantage, I can probably go from about 3,250 per square metre, probably to 4 or 5 in 2 years' time, because there's already property changing hands at 5,000 a square metre on the island. So it depends on the properties, depends on the solvency of the provider, and depends on the accuracy and how well thought through the legal documentation is. So as long as all those tick the box, good idea.
Okay.
As long as it suits your timescale of not occupying for 18 months to 2 years.
Right. Tell us a little bit, John, about properties in Madeira generally. Just to recap, what is the minimum amount that somebody needs to spend on a property in Madeira to qualify for the golden visa?
Well, because the property tax is on a graded scale, it's not as easy to answer your question. It's actually you'd have to pay less tax buying 5 properties at 100 than 1 property at 500. If you buy one
500
property,
is the limit, isn't it?
Yes, but 500,000 is the minimum, or 350 for properties with 30 years old registration.
Okay. How many properties, John and Tânia, let's say John, how many properties over 30 years old in Madeira are there available to buy? Because renovation is not an easy project, is it, when you're doing it from a distance?
Tânia's probably got more experience on this than I have. The ones I've been looking at in the last year, every project, and I've done a lot of property in my lifetime. You know, we've still got £1.5 billion worth of property with my clients in London. So you know, I'm still quite actively involved in property, and I've bought enough plots to build 6 quality houses myself, so that I can learn about that process in Madeira and be more useful. But the projects I've looked at were people's trying to get away with 350,000. By the time they've acquired the site and modified it, very rarely have I seen that being worth more than they've spent on it at the time. So yes, the theory is good. I can see how it might work. Sometimes I think you should be... I've not really got a way of providing that service adequately. And I don't know if you've got 90 days out of every 180, how are you going to manage such a project? Imagine going away, leaving the builder in charge for 6 months and then coming back. Or are you going to come every other month? You know, I think there's some practical considerations there that make it difficult to make that work. You know, but I'm willing to learn. I'm not an expert on that at all at the moment.
I agree with John. I fully agree. So you can find good opportunities because Madeira, Madeira was being colonized by the English. I don't know if you knew that, but the oldest family in Madeira, one of the oldest, is British. We have very good opportunities for houses, colonial houses, but you need to think through, because as in any place, it's a bit of a nightmare to do the reconstructions. There are requirements, and you need to be here to follow them, and even being here is not an indication that it will be 100%.
No,
everything will be okay. Yeah.
And just to recap, ladies and gentlemen, just to not to alarm you, you have to spend 500,000 euros on a property in Madeira if you want to apply for the golden visa in Portugal, i.e. you want to stay living in the UK, but you want to spend more than 90 and 180 days in Portugal, or you want the freedom to travel within Europe. If you want to physically move your life from the UK to Portugal and live in Madeira and get your D7 visa, as we said, the passive income visa, or you're going to work permanently in Madeira and run your business from Madeira, then you don't need to spend £500,000 or euros on a property. You can buy any property you want. Isn't that right, Tânia? You can buy anything you want at any value, at any price. You could buy a shell in the hills and renovate it because you're there all the time. And that's a quite different proposition. I should add also, there's a lot of confusion around the golden visa. Yes, you have to invest 500,000 in a property. You can also invest 500,000 in a range of investment funds in Portugal. It doesn't have to all be 500,000 euros into one fund. You can split it between various funds. And that is an option we're seeing a lot of as well. People are gaining access to the golden visa in Portugal by reallocating some of their assets into Portuguese investment funds, which are compliant with the golden visa restrictions. So this is just to not alarm you. If you are intending to relocate to Madeira permanently, anything is possible for you in terms of price. The 500,000 euro limit is for golden visa. Now we've got.
Can I just give an endorsement on that? Because certainly for those clients who want the passport and who can't really move here for 5 years, maybe they're planning ahead. The fund route is very good. There are something like 24 funds available. I think I've told you I used to be a director of a hedge fund, so I understand how they work internally. So I've interviewed quite a few of those, and I'm very concerned about the internal governance of those funds and whose retirement they're thinking about, whether it's a client or their own. So we need to be a little critical of those investments. So if you want to look very carefully at them. Well, I've kept my securities licenses in Europe now. I've given up those ones in London because it's just too complicated to keep up with both regimes. But again, advice on funds, you need to make sure that advice is given in the right jurisdiction by the right qualified person who's responsible for that advice. And
the Chamber can give you more information on how to do that if you'd like to email us at info@portuguese-chamber.org.uk. Now, I've got one other question for you, John, before we finish, because I'm very conscious of our viewers. I've got just a question from a live question from Timothy. John, you can answer this, or both of you can answer this. My wife...
Christina, sorry, I took the liberty to, while John was answering, I wrote to Timothy. So.
Oh, you're right, back to Timothy.
Yeah,
okay, Just, so, I don't know if everybody...
It's a teamwork, because John was answering the funds, so...
All right, so just the question for everybody is, the question Timothy's put to us is, my wife is retiring from the NHS. Will her pension be taxed twice, once in the UK and once in Madeira? So Tania's typed an answer, but perhaps, Tania, could you tell us that answer so everyone can hear it?
Yeah, so it's also related to what John said earlier. So you need to make sure that from the UK perspective, you're living, in fact, and your center of business and your nuclear family is established in Madeira, so that you close your residency in UK and no problem arises from the UK authorities. But for the pension, if you have dislocated your family, if you're in fact residing in Madeira, if you have changed your fiscal residency to Madeira, you will be taxed if you have applied for non-habitual, you will be taxed at a 10% rate in in Madeira, okay?
Yeah.
But as Jonas said, you need to be careful with the evidence you have that you are a Portuguese resident and not, and that you do not have UK nuances, right, John?
Correct. And I think you see where you can double do it and make sure this is guidance, not advice in the UK. Be careful. Like this NHS pension, for instance, you can approach the trustees with the evidence of being resident in Portugal. You can show them the form 85, I think it is, that you filled in to the revenue in the UK that is told the revenue you've left. So you've satisfied the inland revenue in the UK you've left, and you've satisfied Portugal that you've arrived. With that documentation, you give that to the trustees of your pension fund, and you get them to apply a nil tax code. Because the way in which pensions are paid out, they've got like a PAYE system, and they will normally treat you as if you're on PAYE, assuming that's your income. You can get that tax code changed to 0. Then when you bring the pension and account for it in Portugal, then they can apply the 10% tax.
Yeah.
And then you won't have the bother of going through the tax treaty and reclaiming over deducted taxes.
Yes.
So you can actually apply to the NHS to pay
the trustees
to pay your pension with 0 tax or 0 tax deducted. Okay, I didn't know that. I thought it was automatic. Very interesting. Okay, I thought it was automatically taken, whatever happened. Right, okay. One last question, John, before we finish. I'm just going to ask you, John, to give hope to all of us out there who are thinking of moving to Madeira, who may not have 500,000 euros to spend, or may have more, may have less. Give us a very quick overview of prices in Funchal and in the countryside. What could I get for 400,000 euros in Madeira right now?
Right, one I completed this month for a couple that had no passive income yet because they're not old enough yet. So I couldn't go down the D7 route. The first we actually bought 2 properties to get over the 500. But the first one we bought for 440,000. It was a 3-bedroom house with an additional 1-bedroom flat within it, in a popular area of Lazarento, which is a lovely area near the church. Slight sea views through the middle of other houses opposite, and an income of 750 euros a month coming in from the rented flat within the house. So that took a bit of searching. If I was marketing that and selling on behalf of the owners, I'd been asking another 80 to 100,000 more.
Right, okay.
So, but you've got to do the research and dig and dig and dig and find the bargains. Where you find the bargains sometimes is where the ones which are poorly marketed, mispriced, or the agent just isn't up to it. There's a lot of agents who are very professional, but there's 1 or 2 that really I don't know why they're in the business.
Okay. Oh. Excellent. All right then. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I'm conscious that we've overrun, as we always do, because so many people are interested in this. And I would like to thank sincerely John Mather from Émigré in Madeira and Tânia from TPMc in Madeira. Thank you to you both for giving up your precious time.
Thank you.
This morning. I would like to reiterate, come and see us on March the 31st in central London. Go to movingtoportugal.org.uk and register your place at our next live show. John will be with us talking about Madeira. Sadly, Tânia can't be with us because demand for her services is so great. She's committed to another event, but she will be with us in London in July, which will be the next event that we'll be doing. And it only remains for me to wish you all a lovely day. I hope you're all going to move to Portugal, preferably Madeira, although the Chamber of Commerce is happy wherever you want to move to. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And the webinar will be available very shortly. We'll be emailing you all with more details and full contact details of our speakers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.